Well, welcome once again. Sorry for the late start, ladies and gentlemen. I assure you I am here, however. Had a couple technical things to needed to work out. We do want to thank you for joining me once again. It is I, DJ Churchwarden, or just the Churchwarden, aka the Wonka, coming to you live from the lily pad here at the epicenter of the multiverse on twitch.tv/homebrewrp. Putting my face in your interweb. Since I am a little late this evening, I do want to thank you. I know I need that ring too, and in fact, there is the link where that can be purchased. If anyone would like to bribe the DM, we won't talk about it later, I promise. That being said, let's dive right in, shall we? Tonight, I'd like to cover an interesting topic, or a topic that I at least think is interesting, because I, much like most of you, am a big nerd. I'd like to delve into the underlying spirit of your game. Now this is something that's an intangible feature, often overlooked, especially if you're a module-focused game runner, which is nothing wrong with that. But what we're going to delve into tonight can help you really flesh that out even more as a dungeon master, and also because I like to be inclusive as a player. This is the history of your game. This is the background of your game. This is the rumors and myths and legends of your game. Now, we all grew up where we grew up, and I guarantee that every single one of you, with almost no exception, has some type of fantastical story from your hood when you were a kid, whether it's Bigfoot or Pennywise in the sewer, or the common conceptions of child-born horror story. We all have them, and it's one of the things that makes a community very, very real. These are the ghosts. The ghosts are always part of the past. They're always some remnant left over. Now, we don't necessarily mean real ghosts. I put that out there as a disclaimer because we are talking about D&D. So your grade school was haunted by a girl named Tina who see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Your grade school was haunted by a girl named Tina who died in a fire. And that's what I mean. Every one of us has that story that we can tell from our childhood. And it's that spirit, I think, really, that makes a story become more real. One of my favorite examples is the movie or short story by Stephen King, Stand By Me. Those kids, really, that story created a mythology in a way about that town and those kids' lives and their tale. And it's one that would go on to be told and told and told, most likely, if it were a real town. So what I mean about this, and this is important, is if you're a homebrew master, making your own world or your own place, your own dungeon, or like I said, if you are more of a purchase and play type, and once again, there's no problem with that. But by delving into or creating a vibrant history for the place that you're going to be hosting your game in, you can bring it to life. If your characters are in the town of Hamburg, for instance, and they're going around and hanging out at the tavern, sleeping at the inn, restocking potions at the store, chances are they're going to interact with your NPCs. Your NPCs grew up here, most likely. This is their hometown. People in medieval situations didn't exactly get out and travel often without money. They weren't a lot of tourists back then. Now, your world could be different, and that's fine. But even if there are, you're going to have the opportunity to tell these stories. Now, a lot of times these stories will be a red herring, a road bump to trip your players up, and those are great. Those are great because they extend the game out, which, you want to give a full-bodied experience with a game, unless you're just running tournament or doing one-shots, and even then, there's a little room to mess people up a little bit, And as a DM, it's your job to mess with your players. They like it. They'll love you for it. Trust me. Don't listen to what anyone else says. So, what are you going to tell them? Are you going to tell them about the girl named Tina who died in a fire long ago who haunts the nearby school? They're going to overhear rumors of the street urchins whispering about the building down the street. Are they going to hear about old man McGillicuddy who sits on his porch with a halberd that's rusted and pockmarked, and how he supposedly has a secret treasure buried under his larder that he stole when he was a soldier for the King's Guard? How are you going to entice them and bring this town to life? And I think that's one of the more important parts of this, really. Knowing the history of a place is to know the spirit of the place. If you really look into any town in reality, any city in reality, chances are, unless they were just founded yesterday, which that would actually be an interesting thing to see, they're going to have a long and colorful history. So my suggestion would be to start with reality. Go to any coffee shop, while, of course, maintaining proper COVID safety, social distancing, and whatnot. But you get my idea. Go anywhere within your town. Call webcam, Zoom, Skype, whatever, anybody and ask them to tell you their stories. One of the greatest, I think, titles for a game master in the realm of gaming is storyteller. It's always been one of my favorites. I think, if I'm not mistaken, White Wolf may have coined that. I could be wrong, though, and if anyone knows for sure, please correct me, because I'd love to know. But I believe they coined the term storyteller instead of game master, and I've always been really fond of that because that's what you are. You're a storyteller. You're an interactive storyteller, and you are bringing a setting to life and engaging the people who now live in it, who've created characters within that world. So collect stories. Talk to your players. Talk to us here at Homebrew RP. We have our Discord links and everything. You're welcome to join us anytime. We want to hear from you. We want feedback from you, and the more we get from you, the more we can kind of cater to and build what we're doing to help you, which is what we want to do in the long run. So collect these stories. Ask people to tell you, hey, tell me your silly ghost story. Tell me what kept you up at night. Well, here we go. Yep, White Wolf, World of Darkness. Later, the Street Fighter RPG. Wow. Thank you for that, Homebrew RP. I actually did not know that Street Fighter had an RPG. Oh, dear Lord. That's secretly kind of terrifying and enthralling at the same time. So, when you have these stories, you have a collection in your bag of tricks now. You have, thank you, from the White Wolf Wiki. When you have this depository of stories you can pull from and twist them. I mean, you can randomly generate stories, of course, but there does need to be an organic quality to them. I believe. Maybe you're more creative than I am. If you are, run with it and tell me about it later, because I want to know so I can add your stories to my collection. But just like off the fly right now, the classic story of and they always seem to center around kids. I think it's because they're supposed to be warnings primarily to take children out of the equation when it comes to them getting themselves into trouble. But, you have the story like the Hansel and Gretel's, the kids that wander off and get lost in the woods and something strange or horrible happens to them. You have the tales of infidelity with, a husband cheats on his wife or has her killed, and she comes back from the grave to torment him in life. there's usually some dire warning involved. There's some underlying tale that or even moral to the story that can be gleaned. But all of this stems out of the history. Where was your town founded? When was it founded? Who founded it? Has it always been under the same governmental body as it is today? Is it a fringe element? Do they have a history where I don't know? You can draw contention from even these all make for very interesting settings. They also add opportunities for you to expand within your story very easily. Um, have an off night, somebody's missing from your game. If you left off in town, why not let your characters go and explore the haunted school and find the ghost of Tina? It could be a fun little one shot, and that's another reason why you have these elements that you add to your stories. This is literally, like I said, the spirit of your setting, the ghost of your setting, is to know the history, the cryptozoology, the ghost stories, and the morals, and what are people in your setting going to talk about? Because you want to bring them to life. You want to keep in mind that they are real people. They are, at least within the confines of the story, real people. So you need to bring them to life. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of two-dimensional names that pass information rather than NPCs. And you need to do the same for your characters, too. If you're a player, just as you have these stories growing up, why not sneak a little bit of that in? Because even as adults, as we saw with Chance in chat earlier, we still talk about these things well into adulthood. So just because it was a childhood story doesn't make it exclusive to childhood. So why wouldn't Tom Bumble in the tavern? Why wouldn't he have a few beers in him and suddenly want to tell you about the hairy ape-like creature that used to follow him in the forests when he was a kid and spooked him something awful? Once again, it could be a red herring in your story. It could be a little side quest that pops up from time to time. But either way, it's going to add life to the existing narrative. So your character could do the same. Your character could say, oh, well, that's amazing because, when I was a kid, there was a giant worm that lived under my house that ate all the vegetables I didn't like, and it was amazing. Granted, we don't like to talk about Fifi too often because he gets mad. But still, as I said, these are things that flesh out people as well as locations. And I think it's very important to understand that the spirit of the matter can also become the foundation, when especially in regards to the history of your game, your campaign, your location, and your people. Our history is what makes us. Ask anyone where they're from, and they will all tell you a different answer. Some will tell you their heritage, some will tell you their upbringing, some will tell you their genetics, some will tell you where they were born, where they grew up. History. This is all history. And I'll give you one more example before we move on, I think, into our second half of our episode tonight. And that's a previous character I had in a campaign I played with Chance. We were doing the Mad Mage module. It was actually one of the first games we ran as homebrew RP before I think we even had the name. Which kind of what kicked a lot of this off for us was I played a character named Flinndell. He was technically a rogue, but I took a lot of effort and created a full backstory for him, where he was raised in a nearby farming community. He had a secret religion that he kind of kept to himself, and even had a holy symbol for a more common faith, so he wouldn't have to talk about it. He moved to the big city to get out of the rural life, and became a lawyer there. He was a lawyer. He had business cards. He dressed the part, was always pushing that as his profession, even though he was secretly a fence for the local thieves guild, a very, very low level one. And he didn't really take it very seriously because he was a lawyer at heart. It was where his heart was. He wanted to be a solicitor. So that alone, that little quip, and granted, I wrote out a whole lot more than that because I tend to be very wordy when I get pen to paper, but it helped me flesh out who he was, the spirit of who he was. And I like to think that because of that, Flinndell became memorable to the DM, to the other players. He became a character within the story rather than just my character, if that makes sense. And that was because he had that history for me to pull from. He had that spirit and those back of the mind stories that he could pull from. And a lot of that information never even came out in the game. Unfortunately, Flinndell met a bitter end down in the dungeon, but that happens. Especially when you have such a mean dungeon master. I'm just kidding. It does happen. But once again, as I said, I like to think that because of that background, he became a memorable character. And that's what I'd like to see all of you do when you create any type of character, whether it be your big bad evil guy, your NPCs in town, or your character itself. Because the more you flesh this person out, the more real they become for you and, you know, everyone else in the game. They become this memorable addition to the tapestry of your gaming history. And as any old salty player will tell you, any veteran of gaming will tell you, one of the things they love to do, as you probably just saw, is tell their old war stories, talk about their old characters and their old adventures. It's one of the things I've always found really passionate and endearing about my fellow gamers is that when you really get them going, if you sit back and just let them go and you know, kind of stoke that fire a little bit, they will rile you with stories as if these people were very real and dear to their hearts. You know, people will get fully invested, and that's really the beauty of it. This organic co-op narrative process that this game creates, or all of these games, all role-playing games have created, that allow you to export your fondest fantasies and internal visualizations of who you would like to be, who you could be, who you don't want to be even sometimes, and personify them in this fictional narrative that we all play in. And it's fantastic. Everyone I've talked to has given me something completely different because we all have our favorites. And the favorites are the ones you can tell that people have really put a lot of thought into. So I will say this. Make sure you put some thought into it. Make sure you do the little bit of extra work to create that backstory, to know where they're from, to flesh out their beliefs, their hopes and dreams, the spirit of who they have been, what they grew up to be, will stem from those old stories. Who was their Tina at grade school? Who was the spirit that haunted them? Who was the bump in the night, the ghost under the bed, the myths of treasure? What rounded them out to be the adventurer they would become, the grown-up that they would become? Because it is in this history, in this spirit, that your character will be born, that your game will be born, your setting will be fleshed out, and everything you do will become not just a module, not just a tale, but an epic part of all of it. So, to digress once again, and just to recap briefly, spirit, history, take the time, be creative. I do want to hear your stories if you have them to give. If Even if you do this after the fact, you can join us on Discord. You can contact us through Facebook, through email, through Twitch, whatever. We have a whole bunch of links down below. Check them out and get in touch with us. I do want to hear about your stories. I want to hear about your characters. I want to hear your epic tales. I'd like to meet you. We all do. We're very friendly in our Discord, and we're always looking to expand out. So please come by and talk to us. We want to hear from you. Beyond that, as we have been doing, we'll go from here and continue working on our co-opted town. We've been building it since episode 1, kind of fleshing it out piece by piece to help those of you who work on homebrew maybe pick out a few things here and there that you haven't thought of as you're creating your town. Because it is very easy just to hit a random map generator with a random name generated in like 5 or 6 points of interest and say, here's your town. And sometimes you got to do that. You know, we all DM on the fly sometimes, and you just don't have time to do much else. It's understandable. But if you have time, this is a good way to do it. So what we've got so far is the town of Silver Falls. As we've discussed before, the name comes from the waterfall nearby, made of white water, which is supplied from the Kangas River. We've gone over the government of the town itself. It's a constitutional monarchy within the Bechlorite Empire, appointed burgomaster Lilly and Tovar, and of course we have our council representatives, which we discussed last session. These are the positions within that council. All 6 of the positions that are represented there. For a population of 1,500, we did decide that we also have a terrorist cell in the underground. The Burnt Crows, they take part in various acts of thievery, vandalism, and of course the occasional abduction. So we've kind of gotten, this is all very, very dry, what we've gotten so far. But it's necessary. We know how big the town is. We know kind of how it's run. We know kind of what's going on in the underground, and have a potential for some dissonance created there. We know who's running the show, and roundabout a location. We have the Kangas River nearby. Obviously, we've discussed it's within the Bechlorite Empire, which is taken from our homebrew creation. And tonight, based upon the theme that we've discussed already, I think we should get into a little bit of the history of our town. So we know Silver Falls is probably less than 100 years old. And I say that because if you're familiar with my homebrew world at all, it's a little bit of post-apocalyptic. Because of that, there's not a lot that still exists that's older than 100 years old. So that simplifies matters for us. So we've only got about 100 years of history there. Let's say probably a lot less, probably closer to 50. So it makes it a very new town. It's not fully established. The buildings are going to be new. It's not going to be a vast swath of history. At most, maybe a couple generations. That simplifies things. And for the scope of example, that's a good thing. So we'll say it's right about, let's say closer to 75, just to be safe. So we at least have a good full 2 generations in there. We know it's a human town, so what is the history? Let's say it was founded. Who should we have found our town? Who was the glorious explorer and debonair agent of change who brought about this burg? Now we have a lot of sounds in reality that stem this way. For instance, there's a town in Mississippi, that Mississippi, called d'Iberville, which is taken from the French Iberville brothers, who are some of the original French explorers who came into the area. They didn't found the town, but it was named after them. So these are the types of things, the real life situations that you can kind of pull from. This is a very common situation the world over, and there's no reason why in a fantasy world it wouldn't be the same. People who explore and discover are often revered as kind of a hero figure. You know, they're fantasized about and glorified in that sense. So in a fantasy realm, it wouldn't be that much different. So, let's see. Why not pull from? And I'm sure Chance will love this. I'm going to name the founder, the explorer, Kangas. They named the river after him too. So, founded by a man named Kangas, who was one of the first to brave the waste and wilds to come out this far and try to help reestablish society. So he founded the town of Silver Falls out here near the Kangas River. He liked naming things after him. That's all right. You can't blame the guy, right? Your town, your river, why not? So it's founded by a man named Kangas. We'll save Corki for later. Promise. So we've got Kangas as a founder. He's come along. He's started it off as a simple settlement with you know what, with his best friend Corki. Hopefully I spell this right. I'm gonna look there. Corkey. There we go. With his best friend Corki. Wow, look at that. Typo city. There we go. And actually this adds for an interesting bit of history. We have these two friends that go out exploring. They find what they deem to be a potential good settlement location. There's a water source nearby. It's well protected from the elements. Because of that, the moving water creates an updraft as it falls down the falls, which pushes some of the foul air away, creates a small pocket of more breathable air in a healthier condition. It's perfect. So here's a question. Did they stay friends, or was there a rift? Why are none of the things in the area named after Corki? And I think that sets us up for a split. I think there was some contention between them. There was contention. They fought. We won't say fatal. We'll say it was a rift over some fundamental aspect of the settling. What fundamental were they arguing over? Was it economics? Was it the spirit of the matter? Language? Was it drunk? Oh, okay. Misspent village funds. That's a good one. That's a good one. Kangas was a drunk, yes. See, this is good. We're getting there. So we have, yeah, no, believe me, I know. Kangas was a drunk. Misspent funds for the settlement. That's great. See, so Kangas was a drunk. He misspent the funds intended for the settlement. Because of that, Corki got angry. They fought, but for some reason, I guess probably because Kangas was a charismatic gentleman. Gentleman. If only you guys knew him. Yeah. I'm with you, Master Miss. I actually had a little head tilt on that one, too. Language was a drunk. Although, I'm sure it's out there. So, Kangas was charismatic. Enough to gain favor with the settlers. My lord. The typos are real tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've been cursed to cursed with the fact that language is a drunk. I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. Language should always be a drunk, Master Miss. Always. So Kangas was charismatic enough to gain favor with the settlers. And after the fight, we'll say it spilled out into a little bit of a fist fight. Where Corki won. I like that. Corki won. He beat down Kangas pretty bad. But because of that, the people sided with Kangas. They viewed him as the victim because he was the injured party. Oh yeah, see, we're getting somewhere. This is writing itself now. If it wasn't for the typos, I'll get that in a second. Okay. They sided with him because of it. So the people viewed Kangas as the victim because he got beat up. They sided with him because of it. And they exiled Corki. Poor Corki. So with Corki exiled, Kangas was free to kind of build the city in his image, which is why we have names of everything in town after Kangas, but nothing about Corki. So we'll say this was all 75 some odd years ago that this happened. And after that, even though Kangas was a drunk, he set up the representative system, which we set up last time here. The Council of Representatives, which allowed things to actually be managed properly. He could go be a drunk as the first burgomaster of town, and the city representatives that were elected officials from that first crew of settlers actually ran the show, and they were competent enough to get the town going off the ground, established and growing. And it's still growing after 75 years. It's still a new process for them. In fact, Kangas is possibly still alive, though not likely because of his lifestyle. So that gives us an interesting point. Why not put a statue in the center of town of Kangas, the founder? So we have a statue in the center town of Kangas. Of course, it's epic and stoic and handsome and shows all his best features. It doesn't, of course, go into the bad parts of him. We'll have it. It'll say it even has a small plaque representing the explorer. Wow. This is bad. Representing the explorer, his exploits, and the founding. So now we have a central square that we can add to our city with a big statue of Kangas in the middle of it and a plaque that, should players come through, they can find a little history of the city right there. If Kangas has passed within our narrative, did he have family? Was there a lineage started here, a dynasty, so to speak, starting within town? This is not uncommon, especially with these newer settlements. Are the founding fathers and mothers of the town going to have a dynastic point of view? Chances are, based upon human behavior, they will. Um, so starting with Kangas, of course, let's say he did have a lineage, but his, let's see, should we have a son or a daughter? Anyone want to chime in? Did Kangas have a son or a daughter, or more? Um, Based upon my knowledge of the character I'm basing them on, there are probably a number of them all over the place, but were there any he actually claimed is the real question. Um, I've always gender neutral trial. Oh, we can go there. We can go there. We'll have a gender neutral child. Gender neutral child. All right. So Kangas had a gender neutral child, but they did not follow suit. Did they not follow suit because they were not able to, or did they not follow suit because they were just terribly unpopular? I think is the real question. Of course, they could have gone on to be an adventurer all their own, to branch out, or maybe to found their own thing, or they could have just been a horrible individual that nobody liked, which led to our current Burgermeister, which is Lilly and Tovar. So why was Kangas's child not allowed to follow in Dad's footsteps? Now, there's a lot of fallbacks we can get into here. Of course, I don't want to get too heavy or too realistic in that regard, as far as, anything that would, I don't know, anything that would bring too real life into it, because of, Kangas was a bit of a jerk, from what I remember. So I think the easiest thing to go would be just that Kangas, being a drunk, was a terrible father. Kangas was a terrible father. Took a drink and forced child out, who then became an adventurer. Dun, dun, dun. I think that's probably the easiest way to go with that one. Which led room for Lilly and Tovar to become the new Burgermeister of Silver Falls. And it also probably cut short what could have been a dynasty for Kangas within the town that he founded. Instead, he lies in probably a grand marble tomb at the edge of town. Poor Kangas. Now, once again, this also sets us up. We now have a town square. We have a central meeting hall. We have a warehouse. We have a storehouse. We have some lodgings that we've come up to. Like, the buildings that this town's going to need are growing. Now we also have a cemetery at the edge of town, which is a vast necessity for any settlement. Dead disposal is a huge issue, especially in old world historic settings, because of the need for cleanliness, let's just say. So now we have this history forming. We have Kangas and Corki, the initial founders, the fight that separated them, the dynasty of Kangas that was cut short because he was a terrible father and a drunk, and he passed away knowing that his child left town to be one of those whack job adventurers seeking fortune in the wastelands. A terrible, tragic story for poor Kangas, but a very real one nonetheless. So, that being said, within this mythology that we're creating, we also need to have. I'd like to have some folk tales. So, folk tales are one of the things that really are, as I discussed earlier, the spirit of any location or any story. The folk tales really add a level of vibrancy to your narrative that I don't think an actual written history quite will, because folk tales can be myth, they can be completely fiction, but at the same time, most of them have some foundation in truth. That old adage of there's a little fact in every fiction. And we have a little history that we formed here that we can continue to build on, and I think from here we should probably explore Corky as probably a good source of some of this. So we'll say Corky was exiled into the wastes. Now the wastes are horrible, hard places to live. There's an old rotted forest at the edge of town, let's say. So he disappeared into the old rotted forest. Rumor has it that Corky encountered, building suspense, can you feel it? A werewolf. What? That's right. A werewolf. In all caps, because werewolf. So rumor has it that Corky encounters a werewolf in the wood and is bitten. Turning him. Oh no. Turning him into one. So Corky was supposedly bitten as he was exiled and living in the woods, infecting him with lycanthropy, turning him into a werewolf. So rumor has it that to this day, he still haunts those woods. Tormented and mad, seeking vengeance on the people of Silver Falls. See? Now we're getting somewhere. So, like I said, rumor has it to this day he was bitten, he's tormented, he's mad, he's in the woods, he wants vengeance on the people of Silver Falls for his exile, even though he was probably the smarter party. Even though he played a huge part in the settlement, he was exiled. They turned on him just because Kangas was more creative, more charismatic, and because of that, it led to his untimely infection with this horrible disease. Now, this doesn't have to be true at all. This could be, once again, a red herring, something that the players will hear discussed by, a drunk in the bar or children in the street. But it adds another layer. We've got this new level right outside of town, this potential encounter even. This could be a one-shot adventure all its own. The players dive into the old rotted woods surrounding the town of Silver Falls, seeking the truth behind the rumors of the lycanthrope that's lived there and tormented the people of the town for over 70 years. I mean, that almost writes itself as far as a potential adventure. But even if not, it adds a life, a sense of vibrancy to the overall organic quality of the town itself. And now we have something that kind of has breathed life into it. Um, and in fact, let's take this a step farther. We know we have a terror element in town, right? We know we have the Burnt Crows, who are the Shawneesian folks who have put a small cell to raise hell within the Becklite Empire in vengeance for the way their people were treated. So why not let them use this story to operate in the woods and spread fear? Saying this just I love this idea, the idea that these underground subversives, the Burnt Crows, dress up in lycanthrope costumes to do their dealings in the night in the wood, and in doing so help solidify this new folktale, this new ghost story in the forest to keep people away so that they can deal whatever they need to deal unhindered by eyes that might turn them in, so on and so forth. So now we have a whole new layer that can be utilized within the town, within the criminal element. So do the guards believe this? Have these had sightings? Are the militia living in fear? Are they melting down their heirloom cutlery to coat their weapons in silver just in case? There are so many little quirks and bits of personality you can add to your town just with what we've created here. You know, Tom the guard hates the night watch because he has to sit at the gate till the wee hours, and he's seen movement out there in them woods, and his soldier's pay is not going to cover the cost of a silver weapon, so the best he can do is a fork that he keeps in his pocket, just in case, because darn it, he's going to gouge old Corky's eye out if he comes for him. Suddenly we've got a character building. There's Tom the guard. And this is what I'm talking about. All because of this little folktale, now we have a little bit of an underlying spirit, something to breathe life into our town just a little bit more. These little stories, these little quirks, these little bits of history that you can pull from that make it a more vibrant, living creation. And as we went over in episode 1, your environment is the most important character in your story. And in essence, it's what we're doing here is we're doing a very detailed background of a character in a story, which is Silver Falls itself. Silver Falls is that character. And in doing so, when and if players come across Silver Falls, they'll be able to really dive in and go with it. Now, of course, and I say this as a disclaimer more than anything, it's always important to remember that if your players can derail your story in any way, they will. So if your players come through town, set it on fire, and then go out, I'm sorry. I feel for you, but it happens. It's okay. These are the tears of the DM. Make sure you bottle them. We do have a depository in Lake Geneva in an underground vault where DMs store their tears for the coming apocalypse, and someday they may be represented and produced to destroy the horrors of. No, I'm going crazy with it. You get the idea, though. That being said, though, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for here. I hope that we've helped you to grow and become more of a player, more of a game master. I won't say better because you're great as it is, and I'm not saying that as a placitude. I mean it. The fact that you're playing this game, the fact that you're making the effort means that you are an amazing gamer, and I hope that you can take that to heart and always remember that we do this, number one, to have fun. Fun should always be the goal. If you're not having fun, you need to make some adjustments. I also hope that you are doing okay in these crazy times. Stay safe. Luckily, we have a lot of digital options for gaming these days. Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, etc., etc. We use them a lot. Once again, I'd like to invite you to join us on our Discord or reach out to us through any of the links below to get involved. We've got space at up and coming games. We want to involve more of you in this. We want to hear your stories. We want you to add to our growing narrative, and we'd like to get to know you. So please reach out to us. Let us know how you're doing. Live from the Lily Pad here is always open to suggestions. If you had any, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear your ideas, your suggestions, complaints, whatever you got. But without much further ado, I would like to say thank you very much for joining us. I'm DJ Churchwarden, aka The Wonka, coming to you live from the Lily Pad here at the epicenter of the multiverse on Homebrew RP, putting my face in your interweb. Thank you, and good night.